Hey guys, welcome back. If you've watched my channel for a little while, you know that I think Perun is one of the best airsoft MOSFET manufacturers on the market. They've got a great feature set, their price point is spot on, and I think they're very reliable from what I've seen over the years. I installed the original V2 clicker in a G&G GR25, a nice DMR platform, and had a lot of fun with it. It was really a joy to use, used it many times in the field, and it is really nice. Feels very similar to an AR-15 trigger for a little bit more realism. But they've recently released the Perun Clicker V2 Pro for even more customizability on your trigger. If you want the best, most realistic trigger on the market for the best milsim or just general airsoft experience, the Clicker V2 Pro is the way to go. The package is going to come with your V2 Clicker Pro. It's this little guy. It drops right onto a V2 hybrid MOSFET from Perun, a small Allen key for adjusting the hex screws that are on the clicker, and lastly, a small 3D printed container with all the extra parts in it. I found this really neat. It's actually a totally 3D printed container. You can open it up here and it has all the different safety levers in here for your mechanical safety, screws, and everything else you need to set it up and install it. I'm going to be installing the Clicker V2 Pro in an older gun today I was able to get a hold of a few years ago and was going to use it for a project gun, but it's just been kind of sitting for a while. And I thought this was the perfect time to use it. I'm putting this in a Classic Army CA33. This is the older model, not the reissue model that came out a few years ago and is still available now. This is the first run that came out over 10 years ago. The Clicker V2 Pro comes in a small box with a QR code on the front and the top. Scan that with your phone, it'll take you to a PDF on their website that'll walk you through the install. This small 3D printed container contains all of your extras, if they don't get stuck in there when I'm trying to shake them out. A couple of spare magnets for plastic body guns, a little spring there, a screw, a couple of other 3D printed components, and 6 different mechanical safety mechanisms with different measurements for different gearboxes. The 2 included magnets, so you can place one or both on the back side of this metal paddle here. That'll increase the trigger hardness for guns with plastic bodies. There's a long screw that goes through here to adjust your pre-travel. It is very stiff to rotate, so it won't unscrew while you're shooting. On the back of the Clicker V2 Pro, there are 2 chrome screws that are pretty small. One screw will adjust the brake force and the other will govern the over travel. And although it's a little more difficult to see on camera, there's a grub screw right here where we can adjust the spring tension as well. Installation of the Clicker Pro is really simple. Simply press it into the right half or upper half of the gearbox. It stays pretty stiff and interfaces with these 2 bars right here. This is in a Classic Army gearbox shell that is a little bit older. So it's a pretty snug fit in there, but it does fit. Next, we'll go ahead and pick a mechanical safety lever here. They're numbered 1 through 6, 1 being the thinnest and 6 being the thickest. I've determined that 2 is correct for my Classic Army gearbox shell. It's the 2nd thinnest. Go ahead and drop it in here, and it moves freely, but it's also nice and snug. The mechanical trigger safety was a little bit difficult for me to install actually, partially due to the tiny spring here. One, it didn't seat super well in here, and it was a little bit long, so no matter what, even if you pressed really, really hard, you couldn't actually engage the safety. So I ended up having to trim the spring just a little bit there and put a dab of super glue there so it wouldn't fall out. Now it seems to work reasonably well. You also want to double check and make sure this all works correctly and that your screw is not too far in. Otherwise you won't be able to engage your safety. So we can go ahead and test this here. I'm going to push that and I'm unable to pull the trigger. If I let off of it, I can fully pull the trigger and use the clicker. For this specific setup, I wanted to try and get as close as I possibly could to the HK roller delay trigger, which is not short, pretty spongy for the most part, and is a moderately heavy pull. It's a very combat trigger. It's not a super precision trigger, DMR trigger, like a speed soft trigger or anything like that. It is a heavy, intentional rifle trigger. I've gone ahead and given this setup a pretty long pre-travel and a fair amount of post-travel. The rest of the install for your Perun hybrid can proceed as usual. You of course have to install the sticker on the selector plate. That's pretty straightforward, really simple. This screws into place, you channel all your wiring through, because thankfully Perun does all your wiring for you and it seats really nicely and they always do a great job. Since the Clicker V2 Pro has its own magnets, you don't need to use this little 3D printed shoe that sits on top of the trigger. All right, we have everything installed here. We can see what the trigger is going to feel like. I've got it set up for a pretty long take up there. and a fairly heavy brake. And not the longest reset in the world, but I think long enough. And I think this is a fairly realistic feeling MP5 trigger. It might be a smidge heavier than the actual one or anything similar, but still feels pretty good to me. All right, I've got everything reassembled. I'm going to go ahead and plug in a battery. This is just a Titan 11.1 volt, 1200 milliamp hour, 25C. It's one of the Butterfly 3-cell batteries. I will say before pulling the trigger on this and showing you guys how it works, these MP5 G3 style SCF selectors and the Navy style selectors, they're a little bit tricky to get the sticker on the selector plate just right. But we've got safe, semi, and full auto. This still has the original like speed-oriented Classic Army motor. It's really geared toward the lower springs like M90, M100. This has like an M110, M115-ish spring in it, so it still has that kind of build-up on the speed on full auto as you shoot. Really, really excellent. I kind of want to take it apart actually again and put just a heavier trigger spring in here because it's such a soft, bushy trigger on this, and the real MP5 has a much heavier trigger until you hit that wall. It's still pretty mushy, and really the real MP5 trigger, or G3 trigger, whatever you want to call it in this case, is much mushier in general. Even the brake on the MP5 trigger is not great. I love it, don't get me wrong, but this is better than that for sure. But this is really, really excellent. Adds a whole new dimension to how this feels when you shoot it. Near the end of the manual, you'll see in section 4.7 that the trigger sensitivity should probably set to around 4. I left mine at level 3, which is the stock out-of-the-box setting, but for shorter distances, you may need to set it to level 5. With the Clicker V2 Pro, I think you're getting probably one of the best AEG triggers on the market possible. Ton of adjustability. You can make it feel as close to a rifle or firearm as you can possibly get. And it's not a bad deal. For the US price tag, they're right around the mid $20 range. You drop that in with a version 2 hybrid MOSFET from Perun, you're right around $100. So you get a solid MOSFET, a great trigger, and they're not terribly complicated to install, as you just saw with the whole installation process. Thanks for watching, guys, and a big thank you to Perun for sending out the Clicker V2 Pro as well as the hybrid MOSFET for it. I've also got a review of their new speeder trigger coming out very soon, so keep an eye out for that. I'll see you guys in the next video.